Hello SEO for startups. So there's going to be a bit of a difference to the video this week in that we're not going to be sat in front of a camera. We're just going to do a bit of a screencast. Now, we posted a video yesterday, Google's kind of latest SEO myth busting 101, and they covered a couple of different topics within there around kind of some of their key things for improving SEO performance. Now, one of them was around page speed. And we've talked in passing a couple of times on how to improve the page speed of your website. And we've been doing some testing recently with a new tool called WP Rocket, which is specifically for WordPress sites. So apologies if you haven't got a WordPress site. The video itself might not be very useful, but it's potentially worthwhile watching anyway, just in case anything else pops up on there. Now, this tool itself, we became aware of it a couple of weeks back. And we've been testing it out on our platform just to see how we can try and improve the performance. So we'll run you through today kind of the actual setup and what improvements we saw from that and guide you through. The tool itself isn't a free tool, unfortunately. It is a paid tool, and it's only $49, and essentially that gets you a year's worth of updates and support and stuff with it as well. So yeah, it's $49 for a single website. If you've got more than one website, it may work out slightly more. But yeah, it's worked out really well at the minute. So what we've done is we've tested it on the Meet the Team page. So it's one of the pages on the website. It's got a couple of images on there. It's got a video that loads on there as well. So it's quite kind of data heavy. And what we did was before we set up WP Rocket, we did a bit of a test on the page just to see what the performance was like before. So as you can see on here, you get a page speed score of C and a Y slow score of D. And then we've got a load time at the minute on the page of 4.7 seconds. A page size of 1.86 megabytes, which isn't too bad, and the number of requests that the page makes when it loads, which is essentially the number of additional files, so images, JavaScript files, CSS files, that sort of thing, is currently sat at 135, which is quite high. One thing to note on this page and on the website as a whole is we've already gone through and we've already compressed all of the images. So obviously that won't be taken into consideration, and to be fair, that's probably going to affect this page size stat more so than anything else, and maybe potentially load time as well. We have seen load times on this page of over 5 seconds, which is really high. So yeah, that's kind of a caveat for the page itself. With regards to image compression, there's a couple of really good tools out there for that. There's Tiny PNG, which is a tool that you don't have to be on WordPress to use. You can use it and just upload your images into there. With regards to WordPress specifically, WP Rocket comes with a tool called Imagify, which allows you to compress a number of images for free, and then it starts going to a paid service. There's also Compress JPEG and PNG, a plugin called Compress JPEG and PNG, which does the same thing but gives you a larger remit as to the number that you can actually compress. So they're worth checking out as well from a WordPress point of view. So essentially the tool itself is really simple to install, and I've got the screen open here. So you install the plugin as you would any WordPress plugins, and you essentially, when you sign up to WP Rocket, you will get a zip file which you upload into WordPress. So it's really simple to get that part set up. You then come onto your dashboard. So your dashboard itself just gives you a bit of an overview, some FAQs, some quick actions there as well. So not really much from there. We then move through the settings. So cache, you want to obviously switch on your cache across the website. We basically have switched it on for mobile. We don't switch it on for users because we essentially don't have users logging into WordPress. The platform itself is just logged into by myself and Andy, so we don't need to switch that one on. But if you do have users on your website, then it's worth switching that on just to try and help improve performance for them as well. And your lifespan as well of the cache, we've set it to 5 days. Essentially all that basically is how long the cache is held for. Now we don't update the website on a regular basis, and if we do, we clear the cache anyway. But if it's something that you update your website on a regular basis, it may be worth clearing the cache a bit more. The cache itself is essentially, they just save files so that they then load quicker. So if you're making changes to your website on a regular basis and you're not clearing the cache for a number of days, they will see an old version of the website. So you want to kind of keep that fresh if you can, but obviously the longer you keep the cache, the faster the website's going to load essentially. You can then move down onto file optimizations. This is one of the main areas where you can kind of improve your performance. And it's essentially combining and minifying different files. So there's a couple of bits of things that you need to look out for on here as well. So essentially on the basic settings, we've set to minify HTML, which is pretty basic. It just removes white space and comments and stuff like that from the actual code. We've then put to combine Google font files. So we do use a couple of Google fonts on the website, and because of that, we've combined them together. You can also put to remove query strings from static resources. Essentially, sometimes within WordPress, they add a different version onto the end of a file, which because of that, if you're caching version 1.0 and then you make a change and it then changes to 1.1, that's not going to be within the cache and the user's then going to load it again. So instead, we change it to a static resource, and that then helps with the caching of that file. With regards to CSS files in general, we've put to combine and to minify. So essentially minify, again, it removes white space, comments, that sort of thing from files. It works really well in terms of improving the load of that file. We've also put to combine CSS files. So essentially, if you've got 10 different CSS files because they control different things or they look after different areas of the website, you can combine all of them into a single file. Now what that's going to do is that's going to bring down this number of requests, which the higher the amount of requests, the longer you're going to have to wait for the page to load essentially. Now it might only take a couple of milliseconds to load some of the scripts, but that adds up over time. So you want to try and minify where possible and combine as many as you can. You can also optimize the delivery of CSS as well, so that you potentially some areas where you're not using CSS on the initial kind of load of the page, don't load that CSS until after the page load or at the very end of the page load. Now you've also got JavaScript files as well. So minify JavaScript, combine JavaScript, and then also load JavaScript deferred. So the top two are exactly the same as they are with CSS. One thing to note is that sometimes combining JavaScript files can break the site. So just be careful. If you do combine and you go to the website and certain elements don't work, you can just untick that box and they'll work again. So it's not something that you're going to do permanent damage to the website itself. But we noticed on our site, we use Revolution Slider on the homepage and a couple of the other pages. That essentially doesn't work when this combined JavaScript files is enabled. So it is worth looking at that. You can exclude some files from the combination, and that will obviously stop them from breaking. Loading JavaScript deferred essentially means that you load the JavaScript at the end of the page. Now, JavaScript itself normally used for a lot of kind of tracking elements, for interaction pieces, where things kind of move around the page and click events and stuff like that. A lot of the time they can be loaded at the very end, which means that you will physically see the page, and to the user it looks like the page is loading a lot quicker than when the actual page is completed loading. So that's always worth switching on as well, just from a user experience point of view, more so than a Google point of view. So they're all the items within file optimization. Within media, you can obviously switch on lazy loading as well, which essentially means as you scroll down, when you first load the page, only the images that are within the view that you can see, so say for instance meet the team page, only these two images will be loaded, and the others will be loaded as you scroll down the page and they come into view. Now what that does is it means that you only have to load them two images when you load the page for it to load up, which improves speed massively. And we've also enabled it for iframes and videos as well. We've switched off emojis just because we don't really use them within the content itself, and then we've left the embeds in there as they are for now. Preload is essentially just loading the page and caching that page automatically. So we always set that to run, and essentially what that does is when you make a change, this WordPress plugin will go away, it will load that page in the background, it will get the cache for that page and save it, and it saves you having to do the first cache when someone loads the page initially. So again, it just improves the speed of the website. You can do some bits on advanced rules, but we've not really touched this. It gets quite technical, and you should be okay with just the standard setup. With regards to database, we've essentially put to clean up everything. So essentially what that is, when you make a change to WordPress, a post or a page on WordPress, and you hit save change, what it will do is it will save the older version, and they call it a revision essentially. So what you'll find is if you update a page 10 times, you will have 10 different versions of that page saved in your database. which then starts to increase the load, especially if you've got a website with 100 pages and you're making a large amount of changes across them over the last couple of years maybe. You'll have a large amount of revisions that are saved in your database, which then slows it down. So you can go through and optimize these, and essentially what that does, it removes the older versions. You don't need the older versions because you've obviously got the latest version on there. So this will go through and clean all that up for you. There is also the option to enable CDN, which is a content delivery network. We haven't enabled it within here. Most CDNs are a paid for service, but if you already use things like Cloudflare, and there's a couple of other ones out there as well, they actually have CDNs that you can use, so you can add that CDN within here. Essentially what that does is, instead of you saving all of your files on your server and you load in the page, if the page loads these files from a different server, say Cloudflare, it will improve the speed of that because your server isn't having to do all of the hard work, the other servers are doing it as well. Heartbeat is an API that WordPress uses. It does sometimes slow down the speed of the website. So essentially what we've done is we've popped in here to just reduce the Heartbeat API's activity, because it's used quite a lot within when people are just navigating through WordPress, and a lot of the time it's not needed. So by doing this, you can obviously reduce the amount of times it's used and disable it. So tick that one on. And then there's some of the bits on add-ons which we haven't included, and some additional tools as well. So that's pretty much it. You can go through, you switch all that on. You should automatically preload a lot of the cache, but if you don't, you can come onto your quick links here and preload it, and essentially it just shows it up the top. And that's pretty much it. So we load the page. The page itself loads really quick now in comparison to what it was before, and we did another audit on there, and we've essentially jumped from a C and a D grade and 4.7 seconds up to a B and a B grade and 3.1. Now 1.6 seconds doesn't sound like a lot, but essentially it will make quite a bit of a difference to your users when they're coming onto the site itself. And especially this is the load time for the whole page. So them JavaScript files that you've deferred and you've put down to the bottom of the page, that it will wait for all of that to load. Now, if a user goes onto the page, we can go onto the page here and we can see the page within a couple of seconds. Well, not even that, within about a second, we'll see this top page, but all this stuff down the bottom's all still loading. Now, from a user point of view, the page loads really quick, but when we're running these tools, it will show that it's loading 3.1 seconds, which is still pretty good for the amount of images and videos and stuff that are on there. The page size itself has dropped slightly. Like I say, we've done most of the image cleanup already, so that's actually going to have reduced it. Like I say, I think at one point it was around 3 megabytes, I believe, before the image compression was completed. And one of the big ones, the requests, has dropped from 135, so we were requesting 135 different files as the page was loading. And now with all the combinations and optimizing of that, we've now dropped it down to 29. So really does help with the speed of the website, and obviously, like I say, as you navigate through. Now, as I mentioned, just be careful around the JavaScript of combining them files, because it does sometimes knock that out. So you want to just be careful, make sure everything's okay. But like I say, anything that you change, you can untick and it reverts it back to how it was before, so you're not going to break the site forever. So yeah, just have a look through that. I'll drop a link in the bottom for WP Rocket. It seems to be working really good for us. It'd be great if anyone else has either tried it out or is going to try it out. Just let us know how you get on. Awesome. Cheers, guys.